we welcome you here tonight. Amen? Amen. And I serve as a pastor of this fine church. My name is Dr. George E. Thornton, Sr. And so we are honored to be able to be in the West End community, where we will provide the spiritual guidance and other aspects, because we are part of the community. And I'm so good to see all of you coming in this evening, and it's good to have all of you here tonight. Our meeting tonight is really simple, and that is meaning that we will talk about some of the issues that will impact our citizens in this part of the region, as well as in this community. I'm so happy to have with us tonight, and she is no stranger to me. We take very good pictures together, and so she is no stranger to me. Yeah, selfies. And that is Councilwoman Barbara Sexton Smith, 4th District. Let's put our hands together and thank God for her being here tonight. We're so happy to have a husband with her tonight as well. We praise God for him and for all of you, my brothers and sisters here tonight. I don't want to offend anyone, but because we're in the church, we like to start with prayer. I believe that we want to make sure that God breathes on us tonight as we share and talk, and as we talk about the things that affect and impact the citizens of Louisville. Shall we stand? Loving Father, we come today. We thank you for having carried us to another day. We activate the text where it says in Micah, "He has showed thee, O man, what does the Lord require of thee? To do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God." Be with us in these proceedings this evening, and we'll be careful to give you all the praise, the honor, and glory. For we ask it all in the worthy name of Jesus. Let all the Louisville people say amen. Amen. Amen and amen. You may be seated. Turn to your neighbor and say, "I'm glad to see you here this evening." Amen. 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 Again, it's my pleasure to welcome our Councilwoman Barbara Sexton Smith, the 4th District, to come and share with us this evening. Please put your hands together and give her a warm magazine welcome.
Thank you so much. The only way to start any meeting is to start that meeting with prayer, so thank you so much for that. And he said, let all the Louisvillians, or the people from Louisville, say amen. How about the folks from Washington, D.C.? Yes, a true Kentuckian. Well, I am Councilwoman Barbara Sexton Smith, and I want to just tell you, it is such an honor and a privilege and a humbling experience to get to serve as your Metro Councilwoman, because this is your church. If you don't live in District 4, I welcome you to contact my office at any time should you need us, because you've met me here personally and you feel comfortable doing so. Don't hesitate to do that. If you work somewhere in the District 4 and you do not live in the district, or you do not worship in the district, well then please reach out to us. We're here to help you. We don't do this by ourselves. There are 26 Metro Council members, and one of whom is right here with Councilwoman Keisha Dorsey. Please stand up. As most of you may know, Councilwoman Keisha Dorsey is a new councilwoman, but I'm telling you what, she hit the ground on roller skates. Not running, on roller skates. She was flying, and it is really a privilege to get to serve with her. I recognize a number of faces who have come from quite some distances. We have Randy Weber here. Randy, you were right in front of me. Where did he go? Here he is. Ladies and gentlemen, in the back of the room is the president of our Smoketown Neighborhood Association, Randy Weber. Give him a round of applause. Also in the audience with us this evening, who can answer many, many, many questions that may or may not be budget related and pension crisis related, but neighborhood related and community related. And those are sometimes the most important. So I want everyone to know Jackie Floyd. Jackie, please stand up. Jackie Floyd is with us this evening. Jackie and I met under the leadership of our former Chief of Police, Robert White, and somehow or another, we each got elected, selected, nominated, or appointed to the Downtown Police Advisory Board, and that was many years ago. Jackie Floyd is serving as your Center for Neighborhoods representative. She is boots on the ground. She's the woman that walked all yesterday afternoon and this morning posting, I think, more than 60 flyers announcing the meeting here this evening. So Jackie, thank you, and she can connect you in ways that like no other. Also with us this evening is our LMPD 1st Division Commander, Major Andy McClinton. I want to make sure everyone knows him. Major McClinton has been doing a fine job leading the men and women of LMPD here in the 1st Division for the last several months. This is a new assignment for him. But I will say this, right here in the heart of the 1st Division, which is from 34th Street, the river to Broadway, and then all the way up as you come through downtown Louisville and you're still going east through the Phoenix Hill and Butchertown area. It's a large area, including the entire Central Business District and most all of the Russell neighborhood. Crime rate has gone down drastically in the neighborhood. If I recall correctly, the last full 12-month period that I reviewed the uniform crime statistics, it was a 58% decrease in homicides and a 41% decrease in shootings. And then now, the gentleman that keeps hooting and hollering up here, in case you're wondering, it is my beloved, my best friend, my partner, my husband, Lacey T. Smith. Also joined us, another great Metro Councilwoman, newly elected, representing Metro Council District 5. We have in the house with us Councilwoman Donna Purvis. Donna? And also our, hello, Reverend Snarden. I see you sneaking in. Now I know how you feel when folks show up late for church. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, David. David and Reverend Snarden and I work on a lot of things together. He does great work in the community. And also with us this evening is Teresa Lahara, representing Mayor Fisher's office. Teresa. And the indomitable Reverend Vincent James of Elam Baptist Church, but more importantly, serving as our Chief Community Building Officer in this community. And now what I want to do is I do want to introduce our Chief Financial Officer, because I think we're here this evening to talk mainly, although we'll address any questions or concerns that you may have, but we want to address our budget challenge that's facing us here in Louisville Metro. And with me this evening is our Chief Financial Officer, Daniel Frocht. And I'm going to invite Daniel to join me here in just a moment. And if you will, let's let Daniel go through a financial overview of the problem and how we got here and what some of our possible options are. And then what we want to do is stop talking and then get questions from you. So there are question cards. Did everyone get question cards when you came in? No? And we will have folks that will be walking and we'll have those to hand out to you.
And let them know we have mics on both sides so they can come to the mic and be able to perform their questions.
All right, we'll be able to work with that, but what we would really also like to do to maximize the use of the time this evening so we don't have 14 or 15 guest unannounced speakers this evening. You all know what I'm talking about. I want to make sure we get to everyone's question. We really need to do that. And so I appreciate those of you that have filled out some green and yellow cards saying things that you absolutely do not want us to cut and things that you are willing for us to consider cutting in our budget. So to begin the conversation, how big is the challenge? She's a great big sinkhole. When I saw that sinkhole picture of our beautiful, beloved Louisville Zoo the other day, I thought that looks about like the problem that we've got with our budget right now. And as Daniel's making his way to the podium, I would like to say that my interpretation of how we got to this challenge is that we are required as a local government to balance the budget every year. The mayor, whomever he or she is at any given time, that is their responsibility. They have no choice. They must balance the budget. If one receives a bill in the middle of the year that requires you to have a substantial expense that you did not plan for and you have no control over it and you're required to pay it, that's where we are. So the pension board in Frankfort gambled with about $300 million of the pension fund a number of years ago and lost that money. They lost that money, and so they are holding all 120 counties in the Commonwealth of Kentucky responsible for that. I am proud to tell you all, we have fiscal management that's solid here in Jefferson County. And under Mayor Fisher's leadership and Daniel Frock's guidance as our CFO, we have paid that pension bill from Jefferson County in full every year. Yes, we have. Well, go ahead and applaud. That's right. And you may be asking, well, how big is the bill? Well, we had a $625 million operating budget to pay all of our bills to run the government. And last year, that bill, 2 years ago, our pension bill was $77 million of that. And then we received a $10 million increase in 1 year, so we had to pay close to $86 million. Yes, and it's going to go up 12% 5 years in a row. So if you keep doing that, yes, watch how the math works. 77 million to 86 million to 97 million, and when you keep going and you get to the year 2023, we will receive a piece of paper from Frankfurt that says our pension bill is $136 million. Friends, if our operating and general fund budget is $625 million today, we're looking at about 20% of our budget. So we have to plan for that, and we got to find a way through that. The sky is not falling. That's why I've come here this evening. The sky is not falling. It's a little bit cloudy, might rain a little bit, might get a roof leak before it's over. But we are going to find our way through this together. And I have stated many times, I am not in favor of cutting public safety services that will put you and other neighbors and other people at risk. We've come too far. We've come too far with our LMPD, Fire and Rescue, and EMS. There's a lot to consider this evening. So Daniel, if you would join me here and take over. Daniel's going to present for a few moments. I'll have another comment or two, and then we want to get to your questions. Do you need any of this PowerPoint? Okay.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sexton Smith. I'm Daniel Frock. I'm the city's Chief Financial Officer, and I'm thankful to be able to address you tonight and to be hosted in this beautiful church. So, and I thank you for your attendance and your interest in this very public issue. So, Councilwoman Sexton Smith did a very nice job setting up what the problem is. And before I get too far down the road, who's familiar with the proposals and with the problem? If you just by show of hands, I assume if you're here, you're somewhat familiar. So, and I've seen some faces are familiar. I've seen you at other meetings. So I'm not going to go too in depth and too long so that there's time for questions and answers. But Councilwoman Sexton Smith did a nice job of relaying why we're in this pension bind. I would only maybe add to it a little bit that not only is there the loss of investment funds, but there are a couple of other structural things that have caused the city some issue. One is that there are 8 different pension systems, and we are one. We are CERS, which is County Employee Retirement System, one of 120 counties in the Commonwealth. We are linked together with the Teacher Retirement System, with KERS, which is the State Employee Retirement System, the Legislative Judicial Retirement Systems, and so forth. Back in the fall of 2017, the council unanimously adopted a resolution asking to separate or free CERS because we are the most well-funded of the systems. But you might think of us as all being in the same rowboat, and we're rowing a little bit stronger. We're more funded than the other ones. When you're more well-funded, you have a kind of a different viewpoint for how you invest funds and so forth. As she relayed, hi, President James, welcome, just looked over and you're there. As she relayed, this is not a problem that's of local making. It's not the Metro Council's issue. It's not the mayor's issue. These funds are managed out of Frankfurt, out of the retirement system, and we've paid the bills that have come due. But what they're saying now is that we want to change the assumptions for the pension, that the pension will earn less of a return, and that payroll growth will grow a little more slowly, and that's created this large hole. She mentioned the sinkhole at the zoo. Our funding hole is $1.3 billion That's the unfunded piece of what is owed for the retirement benefits for retired employees, for current employees who are earning the benefits. So to fill that $1.3 billion, we're going to see the pension increase, as she relayed, up to about $136 million in just 4 years at FY23. That's a large structural change for us. It's not something that we can handle. It's not in the couch cushions or efficiencies. Even though we run a very efficient government, we're AAA rated by the credit rating agencies. We post our response times and our measurements that we look at each department online. Each day, each department has some government-wide metrics that relate to things like sick leave and overtime and injury rates, and then they have department-specific metrics. So we do look for efficiencies where we can. We don't have $65 million of efficiencies out there, which is why we're having this discussion. Two of the options that are out for any government are service reductions or raising taxes, and that's why we're having this discussion. I have packets of materials that I'll leave behind. It's nothing that you need to go through right now, but it describes potential reductions, and it's across the entirety of the government. Public safety would be represented. They're about 60% of our $625 million budget. Quality of life agencies, like the library, like community centers and parks, like public health, those would be impacted as well. The back office would be impacted. That's my office. We pay the bills, we invest the funds, we have payroll, we manage workers' comp and risk and those types of things, manage grants, go through audits. Every department would be affected within the government. That's one potential proposal. The mayor felt it important to lay that out so that we had an adult discussion about what happens if we don't have the funding. And then separately, thanks to Councilwoman Sexton Smith and to President James as two of the sponsors of the ordinance, we have an ordinance before us that would increase insurance premium taxes to balance that out. And the structure of that ordinance is to increase the tax to match the increase in the pension liability that we have, so that the funds would come in as the pension is due. That proposal that's before you, or before the council, is to increase the the insurance premium tax from the current 5% on non-auto and non-group health insurance. So this would be on things like property insurance, on boat insurance, on if you have casualty insurance, if you have malpractice insurance or business insurance, renter's insurance, those types of things would be affected. To raise that from 5% to 12.5% for the next 2 years, then 13.5%, and then 15%. Part of the reason that auto is not included is because in reviewing and working with the council, there are very disparate rates that are set for auto. It's not the same person living in a different zip code might have different rates depending on the zip code of where they live. We didn't think that was fair. That's not something that we wanted to kind of add to issues by increasing the auto rates, but that's also one of the reasons that the rates are a little bit higher. Who brought their insurance bill here tonight? Did anybody bring their actual insurance bill? Your homeowner's insurance, wherever you might pay insurance. I would encourage you to take a look at your homeowner's insurance and see how much you pay in premiums, and then it'll be listed there as a local tax and then as a state tax as well. So I would encourage you to take a look, but on average, a home insurance policy might be somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, depending on the home. And then in turn, we charge 5%. That would be moving up to 12.5%, ultimately to 15%. It would work out to somewhere between $7 and $15 a month, depending on how much insurance you buy. So that's one of the proposals, is the reduction. Another proposal is the insurance increase, and I've kind of laid out the issue that we have before us. And then I'm just going to hit one or two common questions that I hear. Why tax insurance? Why not tax something else? Why not tax gaming? Why not tax vaping or cigarettes, tobacco products, or alcohol or something? All those are good suggestions. All those are items that the General Assembly in Frankfort does not give us the authority to tax. So we don't want to tax insurance. As Councilwoman Sexton Smith relayed, the management of the pension is centralized in Frankfort. You might think of that as our expense side of the books. On our revenue side of the books, we have very limited options. Frankfort limits the types of things we can tax and the amount that we can tax. So when we looked at things like a restaurant tax, that's not something that we can currently implement. That would be a discretionary expenditure, and it'd be something that we would likely be interested along with the council in taxing instead of insurance, but that's not currently available. It is available if you were in Shepherdsville, if you were down the road in I-65. I've heard suggestions on a local option sales tax. We don't have that authority yet. A constitutional amendment would be required by Frankfurt to give the power to tax locally. If you go down to Nashville, go a little further down I-65, they do have a local option sales tax. They pay 8%, 2% stays with Nashville. That's great if you're a tourist destination like Nashville, like Louisville's becoming. It spreads the tax burden out, and it's not just to the residents, it's to people that are visiting. We had the most tourists we've ever had last year. Almost none of it went directly into the general fund. It went into our coffers. It went indirectly into the fund by employment and by businesses staying open, but that's not the same as a direct tax when you go to a restaurant or when you stay in a hotel or when you spend money when you come to a city. So just a couple of Q&A that have come up before, and with that, Councilwoman Sexton-Smith, I don't know if you want to elaborate further or if you want to throw it open for Q&A.
All right, so also joining me this evening is the president of the Metro Council, President David James, representing Council District 6. And President James, I would like for you to make a few comments to the folks before we start taking some questions. Thank you.
Hi, how's everybody doing today? All right, I'm glad you're here to listen. Since this whole conversation has come up, one of the things that I find is sometimes frustrating is that not everybody has the information, and so it's hard to have a fact-based conversation when not everybody has the information. And so a few things I wanted to talk about. One is so that everybody is clear, and Daniel does a great job explaining, but Daniel's an accountant, and he kind of talks like an accountant sometimes, and I often tell him that. But I just want to break down a few things. A lot of times people have emailed us and called us and said, why don't you tax Churchill Downs? Well, Churchill Downs is already taxed, but they're not taxed the way that we're talking about. We don't have the ability to tax them the way that you're talking about. The state has to give us that authority. The other conversation is, why don't you tax bourbon? We would love to be able to tax bourbon, but we don't have, again, the authority to do that. And then people say, well, why don't you legalize gambling in Louisville? We would love to legalize gambling in Louisville, but we don't have the authority to do that. And then people will say, why don't you legalize marijuana? We'd love to be able to legalize marijuana, but we don't have the authority to do that either. So we can't tax any of those things. And so we're really stuck between a rock and a hard place. We are trying to provide services to people in our districts, and it's a hard thing to do. And at the same time, we realize that raising this tax also is hard on our district. And so, you know, you're kind of stuck between two evils, and you try to say, well, which one is it that you're going to choose? And so what we're talking about right now is try to find some ways to cut the budget some, but also find a way to raise the revenue, raise taxes, the minimum amount we can to still be able to make sure we take care of people. And that's the hardest thing to do, because if you cut it too deeply, then the things that scare us will take place. The things about losing police officers, the things about not being able to take care of the homeless, the things that we consider to be important, the things about taking care of the community ministries, which helps people pay for their light and gas bill and prescriptions and food for Dare to Care. All of those things are how we do that through tax money. And so when you take that away, we don't get to do those things, and it hurts a lot of people. And I have said many times that however deep we cut, I don't want people to be hurt from it very badly, nor do I want anyone to die from our decision. And so, and that's a real possibility when you talk about government. And so I'll just leave that at that for now and turn it back over to Councilwoman Sexton-Smith.
All right. You know, so as we start opening this conversation up for your all's questions about what kind of increased tax do you think you could handle? You know, is it a few dollars a month? Is it $4 or $5 or $6? Is it $10 a month? Maybe 12 or 13, depending on what your situation is. So we need to hear from you about that. And we also need to hear really specifically What are you willing to cut? So when we all started looking at the spreadsheets that Daniel provided us with that shows our general operating budget, we learned very quickly 60% of the entire $625 million budget that we have is for public safety. 60% of it. Now hold that thought in your mind. 72% of our entire budget is for employment cost and the salaries and the compensation packages for our employees. So every day we hear, cut the fat, cut the fat. Well, I can't seem to find it. There's maybe a little bit here and there. So you say, well, what's been going on the last 6 or 7 or 8 years? Do you all realize that in the last 8 years, we've gone from having 6,100 employees, Metro Louisville, to 5,500? That's 600 jobs that have been reduced, combined. This word Daniel uses, he calls it attrited. I said, what is that, Daniel? He said, it's attrition. I said, is that like nutrition? He said, no, jobs that we no longer have that are there. So that's 600 fewer employees. So it's very important, I think, to compare how's our city doing compared to some other cities. Do y'all agree we ought to look around and see if we can learn something from somebody else? So when we look to see how many employees work for a city government compared to how many citizens live in a community, well, here in our community, we have, I believe it's 123 citizens for every employee, right? And in St. Louis, it is 46 citizens for every employee. I don't know what their budget crisis is right now. President James, they may have legalized marijuana and gambling. I don't know. All right. With that said, we really would like to open up for questions. I don't have a question card in my hand. Krista, did anyone take a question card? We have green cards. Would you get that front? And while we're picking those up, I've noticed we have another very special guest in the house. Reverend Jeff Ellis is up here on the second row, ladies and gentlemen. Give him a round of applause. All right, so the green cards are what services are you against cutting? This person wrote, I'm against cutting the living room. Please don't close the living room. Raise your hand if you know what the living room is. All right, while we're waiting for a few more cards. The living room is a model program that we started studying in other communities 2 years ago. We brought it here. We did a pilot program. The Metro Council funded it at $325,000 2 years ago. This last year, the year that we're in right now, we funded $1 million. The living room is a model where someone who has an encounter with the police, but it's a very low-level, nonviolent encounter. They may be dealing with some mental illness issues. They may be dealing with some addiction issues. It may be drugs or alcohol, and they're just challenged. What does LMPD do on a regular basis when they pick these folks up and encounter them? Their option, if there's some kind of an offense, is to take them to the jail. I believe, Major, is it about an average 4-hour window if an officer takes someone to the jail? And don't hesitate to correct me. Okay, anywhere from 2 to 4 hours when someone's in a police car and goes to the jail for a drop-off. That's that officer off the street when you're needing to call them and you need them. And then the person is booked into our county jail, may have a very minimal bond. They may not be able to afford the bond. That gets in the way of their job. The next thing you know, that gets in the way of paying their apartment rent. The next thing you know, we're busting up a family. And it just all goes to heck in a handbasket, as my mama used to say, really quick. And then try to find your way out of that. The living room has an alternative. A police officer encounters someone and can make the decision, instead of going to the jail, they go to 7th and Magazine Street, where Centerstone is located. Drive by there. You will see a beautiful blue beacon. It's a light about the color of my dress right outside the door, and that's where they knock on the door, and it's about a 2 to 3 minute handoff. That person then can go inside. It's a warm, safe environment. They're not required to do anything while they're there. It's just a safe place to settle and land. Yes, it is. 2,500 entries have gone through our living room door since we started the pilot program and since this year that we've been there. 98% of the folks coming through there have left with some kind of information, my understanding is, to help them take the next step. Not everybody takes the next step. Here's the good news. Do you have to be with a police officer to go to the living room? No. Because your all's Metro Council, President James and I and the others that were on Metro Council last year, we voted to approve that $1 million because that opens up that blue beacon door to receive you, a loved one, a friend, a family member. So if you know somebody who's this close to saying they'll take help and you just can't get them to cross over, maybe there's a stop at the living room, and just maybe, and it may have to go 9, 10, 12 times. Y'all know, but that 13th time might be the lucky charm. So that's the living room model. Someone said do not cut services for mental health and do not cut the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. How many know what the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is? All right, there was half of you. So the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was set up many years ago. Your Metro Council in the year 2008 voted to fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund with $10 million a year. And then that money would be used to leverage private investments and other grants and other funding to build affordable housing, in this community. That was 2008. It was supposed to be $10 million every year. Well, in the year 2017, when I looked at the total contributions, it had been $2.5 million. If anybody nodded off, $2.5 million instead of $80 million over that period of time. So your council, including myself and President James, we fought hard for that. We are proud. We fully funded that Affordable Housing Trust Fund, not 1 year, the last 2 years. And in doing so, for every dollar of yours, every taxpayer dollar, this is your money that we are voting on. For every dollar that we put into the Louisville Affordable Housing Trust Fund, they get a $16 return on that. Think about that. More than 1,100 new units are being built or have come online. The reason affordable housing is so important to us and very important to me, and I've stated all along, food, clothing, shelter will be my top 3 priorities. The reason it's so critical in our community is I'm only going to make a few more comments about this. It happens to be one of my favorite subjects to talk about. Housing. It's housing first. That's where it all starts. You need that foundation. So in our city, we have one of the lowest amount of affordable housing stock. We have fewer affordable houses available to rent or to buy than most cities in America. Not all, but most of them. Couple that with, right here in Jefferson County, we have one of the highest eviction rates in the nation. This is working against itself. And one more thing, y'all. The last labor statistic report that I reviewed showed that there were 663,000 paychecks in our community. 663,000 paychecks. Of that, 254,000 people getting a paycheck do not make enough money to afford a 2-bedroom market rate apartment. That is a crime. Now, what do you have to make on an hourly basis to afford a market rate 2-bedroom apartment in Louisville, Kentucky? Jackie Floyd knows. We talk about it all the time. You have to make $15.79 an hour. 254,000 people don't make that in our community. So that's why I think that person put, don't cut the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Here we go, Major. Don't cut police officers, don't cut EMS, and don't cut the resource centers. All right. President James, why don't we switch up? You got some yellow cards there.
Well, you mentioned Jackie Floyd earlier, and so Jackie, stand up there for a second. Thank you for being here, Jackie. Jackie wants everyone to know that the Jeffrey Thompson Residential What is that? I'm sorry.
I just want to invite everybody to the Rossville Neighborhood Association.
There we go.
That's March the 26th at Western Bridge Library at 6:15. It's really important that we come out and support this neighborhood organization because we have a right and we have responsibility to know what's going on in our community. We also need to be sitting at the table as well.
Thank you, Jackie.
President of the association, I'm Jeffrey Thompson.
There you go. So a lot of these questions are very similar, so I'm combining two questions together with this one. And it is, what process do we have to take to amend the authority to tax cigarettes or alcohol? And why can't we ask Frankfort to allow us to increase our local tax? And have we asked? The answer is yes, we've asked. The mayor's been asking for 5 years. Frankfort's not listening. We actually have a bill currently, House Bill 345, that would allow us to do a restaurant tax. And it's not moving anywhere in Frankfort right now because they don't want to give us that authority. Don't ask me why, don't know. But our local House and Senate representatives want to give us that authority, but the ones that are not from Jefferson County are not feeling us. And so what I would say to you, how do we change that? Vote in November, okay? And if you have friends that live in the rest of the state where we don't get to vote on those people, tell them to vote in November. But voting is how we change that. The next one is, how did the state lose over $300 million, and how do we keep the state from doing it again?
You want to talk about the pension board?
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about the pension board. So the state runs the pension board. The governor, Governor Bevin, who made his platform on running for governor to crush the pension system and to crush Medicaid, is working on doing both of those things. And he's pretty effective at it. The pension board was changed about 1.5 years ago by the governor. He switched out all the other people and put in his people. Once he put in his people, our assumptions changed. And I don't know if Daniel got to talk about this before but normally when you change assumptions from the 7.5% to the 6.245%, then you would change that like 1/4 at a time or 0.5% at a time every year till you worked your way down. You just wouldn't go shebang. Because when you do that, it puts a shock into the system and causes us to have a problem like we have now. Now, one could say, did the governor intentionally do that so he could bankrupt cities and counties? Probably so. And so, now is he going to admit to that? Never. But that is the intention, to crush the pension system. And so he's making a good effort at it. Another one of the questions was, can other cities help us with our problem, the smaller cities around us? They're going through the same thing we're going through. Shively, St. Matthews, all of those cities, every city and county in the state of Kentucky is experiencing what we're experiencing. Now, the reason you may not be hearing about it is because we're the largest city in the state of Kentucky, and so everything we do is in the news and under the microscope. But other cities and counties are trying to find ways to raise revenue and cut expenses in order to pay for this. Now, is their price tag as large as ours because we have as many employees? No, but it's still a hard thing for them. And if we don't find a way to deal with this situation, you're going to see cities and counties filing bankruptcy because they can't pay this bill. And it's getting bigger and bigger every year. Louisville has a way to kind of deal with it, but it's a painful way to deal with it. But those other small cities don't. Largest, I take that back. Daniel wanted me to let you know that Louisville is the largest and most transparent city in the state of Kentucky. Go ahead.
And I'm sorry, I would add too, there was state tax reform last year at the state level. $400 million of revenue raised, less than 2 days of discussion on it. We've been having this community discussion for about 6 weeks. It's why you're here. It's one of the reasons that we're transparent. We're having this upfront conversation. I don't think anybody got to vote on what products or services sales tax were expanded on last year. It was just told this is what the General Assembly's done. So it is our size that draws attention, but it's also our openness and transparency.
Okay, these are two good ones. All right, I have a question card that says, is the tax on homeowners' property the only way to raise revenue? Did they add the auto insurance tax to the proposal? Go to the back. Do any of the smaller surrounding cities, Shively, St. Matthews, J-Town, and so forth, have any capabilities of helping the city of Louisville? All right, so is the tax on homeowners' property the only way to raise insurance? I'm glad that question was worded the way that it is. No, that's not the only way to raise revenue, is what I meant to say. As Daniel said earlier, there are 3 ways for us right now to raise revenue. It is the insurance premium tax. That's not on your property taxes. Your property taxes are a bill that you get if you own your home, or it is included in your mortgage payment. That's very different from what we're talking about raising. We're talking about your homeowner's insurance policy. So I've received many phone calls from folks that did not understand that. At the Yearlings Club on Sunday, after a wonderful forum where Councilwomen Dorsey and Purvis and McCraney and Shively Mayor Beverly Burton were speaking, a woman followed me down the sidewalk and said, "Councilwoman, you have got to save me. You've got to save me." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Please, please vote no. Do not increase my property tax 3 times. Please don't do that, Councilwoman. I can't afford this." I said, "We're not talking about increasing your property tax." She said, "You're not?" I said, "No, we're talking about homeowners insurance." She said, "Well, that's a whole different story." I said, "It sure is." I said, "May I ask you a few questions, and if I get too personal, tell me to stop. I'll do this with you too after the meeting's over." I said, "Do you own your home, ma'am?" She said, "You know I do. I'm really lucky." She says, "I'm 65 years old and I own my home." I said, "Do you mind me asking you what your home is valued at?" She said, "No, I don't mind at all. I'm proud of it. It's $190,000. I said, "Do you know what your property taxes are?" She says, "I do." I said, "Well, set that over here because that's not in this conversation. Do you know how much insurance? Do you have homeowners insurance, ma'am?" She said, "I sure do." I said, "Do you know how much that is a year?" She said, "Oh, it's a little bit under $2,000 a year." I said, "Well, can you get your bill out of that paper file in your cabinet at home?" She said, "I sure can." I said, "Get that out and look for insurance premium tax." And you guys, I have samples here. Not hers, but another one that I'm going to have in the back of the room, and I really would like everybody to take one because 99% of the people do not know which number on here we're talking about. When it was all said and done, it's a $5.46 a month change. That's a whole lot different from where she was started on the property. So our options to raise revenue are the insurance premium tax, the car rental tax, and then the franchise fee, which is not in service right now. Raise your hand if you know what the franchise fee is with LG&E. That's interesting. That's a good thing for President James and Councilwoman Dorsey and Purvis and I to know, because I'm under the impression the franchise fee is something that nobody wants to be on your bills. And when it goes on a bill, it can only go on those in the urban service district, which is your central business district in the surrounding area, and the unincorporated cities. So in Jefferson County, there are 82 cities, right? We can't put that franchise fee on the vast majority of them. That's not really a fair way to distribute this pension problem, I don't think. Why put it on you as a burden if we can't put it on everybody in the area? So that's the answer to our options on how to raise revenue. And then someone asked, can other cities help? As President James said, he answered that, but other cities have different insurance rates. Their insurance premiums are different. It's okay to say this because I know that Councilwoman Dorsey is answering questions about this every day. Shively, the entire city of Shively, is in Council District 3. Shively's insurance premium tax is already at 10%. Louisville's, ours, is at 5%. Some other small cities are at 7% or 8%. So we may be moving in that direction. I'm working with my fellow colleagues on a proposal that will have a modest increase in that insurance premium tax with some cuts. The second card I'm holding says, how come you all can't cut salaries? Yeah, let's talk about that, because that's my second favorite subject. Housing was my first. And I may be a lone voice in the wilderness so far. I'm not sure yet. I keep inviting people to the party, so to speak. It says starting with Metro Council members first. So I have stated publicly on many occasions, and again today, I believe it's been reported in the media, I believe that elected officials should lead by example, and that's not an easy thing to do. And so each of us ran for office, and that was not easy to do. And you asked us, you voted for us, and you placed your trust in us, and we all know we're a republic. That means you expect us to go to City Hall, do the research, do the hard work, and start providing leadership with ourselves first. So I've made it very clear. The first place to cut is I'll offer my salary. I cannot speak for everyone else. Not the whole thing. Not the whole thing, y'all. No, well, not the whole thing. So but I'm willing to take a reduction in whatever you think is reasonable. The second thing that I have control over as your councilwoman is my Metro office budget. The first 2 years I've been in office, we have turned back, Krista, have we turned back as much as half of it? Or Krista Robinson, legislative assistant for District 4, many of you have probably spoken with her on the phone. Raise your hand, Krista. It's just the two of us in our office, and we watch every penny. And then the third area is something we have as council members called discretionary funding. Those are our neighborhood development funds. This is a very controversial conversation to have. However, I've offered that could be a place to reduce first. Start with leadership first, lead by example. 26 council districts receive $75,000 each every year. I understand that's money that goes directly to the districts. I understand that. I understand that some of your organizations may be recipients of that money, but I also know where I have some control, and I would cut with myself first. President James, you ready?
All right. Why is funding for the Passport building on Broadway being stopped? Well, that's a good question. Remember we talked about that governor earlier? So I'll have to brag on somebody. You all know her, and right now she's been acting as Vanna Black, and that'd be Councilwoman Dorsey. She's been working on our behalf with state government to try and work with the governor and other state legislators, Joni Jenkins, Gerald Neal, Reginald Meeks, all those folks to bring some common sense to this particular situation. But the basic reason that the governor is doing this is because, as I stated before, he said he didn't like Medicaid, and he's going at it. And so what does that do to us? That means that Passport is in serious trouble because of that. It also has caused the construction work at 18th and Broadway to stop. That particular facility is a key economic development factor for our neighborhoods and for jobs and for revitalizing this part of the city. And so it is not by accident that that happened. I don't care what he says. And so what I can tell you is that there are meetings taking place. There is pressure being applied. Councilwoman Dorsey is a fire engine on the way to a fire, trying to get this resolved, and she's working diligently at it. Her background is in healthcare, so you can't say some stuff to her that's not true that she will go, oh, okay. That's not going to happen with her. As a matter of fact, I got a phone call this morning. I had not told her this yet. I got a phone call this morning from State Senator Gerald Neal, and he says, son, let me tell you something. That Keisha Dorsey, she knows her stuff. And I said, amen. I I said, that's why I put her in charge of the Health and Education Committee, and she's on it. And so I have great faith in Councilwoman Dorsey's abilities. She comes up with some very bold and dynamic questions that I appreciate her for on a regular basis. I know some others that probably don't, but I do appreciate it. So what is happening with Passport? If Passport fails, just so you know, they have hundreds of thousands of people here in this zone that are dependent upon Passport for their life. And there are about 18,000 people that go to the family health centers here in Louisville that depend on Passport. If Passport goes down, we'll lose 2 to 3 of those family health centers. And that is not by accident. So I would tell you to write the governor, but I don't know that'd do any good because he's not listening. But that doesn't mean don't write him anyways. I would call him, I would write him, and I would write your state legislators and tell them that this is a problem. They need to hear from you. And then the other thing I would tell you, in November, vote. Okay, vote. My second question is, can the city sell municipal bonds to offset some of the debt? Will a change in the governor's office help in later years? A change in the governor's office will help the rest of our lives. And so, for those that are born and unborn at this point, can the city sell municipal bonds to offset the debt? So Daniel explains this better than I do, but the basic way that I can explain this to you is that we use bonding to pay for things. Like we build a building, that's a thing. There's not an ongoing cost. You pay for that one time over a period of time. You build sidewalks, you do paving, you do things. Our operational costs are that we pay people to do services for people. And those are ongoing costs day in and day out. We know what that cost is because we're paying those salaries. Those are the things that we have to do every day. The things like we put gas in a car every day. The things like we buy printer paper every day. We pay salaries every day. So we can't use bonding in order to pay for this debt because that creates a structural imbalance in our budget. It's like you going to the grocery store, you've run out of money, and now you start tapping into your savings account. That savings account doesn't replenish. It's it. And so that's what we would end up doing with our budget, and that's not how you do good financial practices. And so I don't know if Daniel got to tell you in his conversations, but Louisville is in the top quartile of all the credit rating agencies because we pay our bills and we have a good financial management system. Daniel does a really great job, even though he's a great guy. And you could never pay me all the money in China to do his job because I glaze over when he starts talking about dollars. So I'll turn back over to Councilwoman Sexton Smith.
Okay. All right. Is there any way to raise revenue through auto insurance tax premium? So that is a question that we keep getting over and over. And how many of you live in the 40210, 40211, and 40212? And 40203. All right, here's what we know about the auto insurance. And well, hello, Joanne Robinson. Here comes the neighborhood president, Joanne Robinson from Paristown Point. You all welcome Joanne. Paristown Point neighborhood is right on the other side of Beargrass Creek from the Smoketown neighborhood. That's where the Urban Government Center is located. So the automobile insurance rates are set in Kentucky in what I consider is insurance redlining, and I've gone as far as to call it, and I'm not shy about saying it. I think it's one of the worst cases of discriminatory insurance rate setting that I've ever seen, because if you live in certain zip codes, not who you are, how you drive, what kind of car you own, right? Isn't that what redlining is around areas, streets? We all know that story. And so if you live in, to my knowledge, 10, 11, and 12, your automobile insurance will be 2 to 4 times higher than if you lived in a different zip code. And this was brought to extreme light in the caucus room in a meeting a few weeks ago when Councilwoman Jessica Green, who represents District 1, came into the meeting and said, colleagues, I'd like to pass something out and just show you a chart that I created. She's recently married. She said we can share the story. Her husband moved from his home in the East, and he now lives with her. Same car, same man, same driving record, and his insurance doubled by virtue of the address changing. So Jessica Green led the charge. I joined right in there with her, and many of us are right there, not all of us, many of us are right there with her on do not raise the insurance premium tax on the automobile insurance because it's already discriminatory. It's already hurting folks too much. However, there has been some discussion as we've been looking for this third option that I mentioned to you. It wouldn't be all new revenue or all cuts. Where do we meet in the middle? There has been a little bit of discussion about the possibility of maybe phasing in a much lower percentage increase on that automobile insurance premium tax. It's something we're considering. President James and I can't tell you, here's what the plan is today and where we're going, because we are negotiating this morning, noon, and night with our colleagues. We will be voting in the Budget Committee this Thursday, 4:30, City Hall. The Budget Committee will vote on what the insurance premium tax increase will or will not be. We will not be voting on the entire budget for next year. We will not be voting on all the specific cuts. You all know that because you know we negotiate that in May and June after the mayor brings us his proposed budget. All right? Then it says how much of the tax increase is really about the pension and how much is about paying other things. I'm glad someone asked that question. There's been sufficient confusion throughout the community about this. I think to Mayor Fisher's credit and under Daniel's guidance, they wanted us all to know how big the whole problem is, not just a piece of the problem. A piece of the problem and the challenge is our pension obligation. But also on top of that, guys, is increased health insurance costs this year, plus reduced revenue that we had anticipated would be coming in. And when you add it together, that's the answer to the question. There's some health insurance increase, there's some pension cost increase, and there's a few $1 million. Is it $5 million less in expected revenue, Daniel? $9 million less in expected revenue. So, President James, I'm not sure where you are on this, but I will just say I have stated very clearly in the last 10 days or so, if we're going to do this insurance premium tax increase in the ordinance, which will become law, I want very strict language that will pass legal test that says all those monies, new revenues from your increased insurance premium shall go, not may go, shall go to our pension cost. I do feel strongly about that. And then the other thing I also want us to do is that in years to come, year 2, 3, or 4, as President James has laid out, if Frankfort gives us the authority to have other taxing options or do other things, or the Kentucky sees a sales tax increase, or gives us the opportunity for the local option sales tax, I want us to review the rate that we increased you and to look at possibly scaling that back. Not a promise, but we ought to look at that. Because I don't want to go 4 or 5 years down the road and we have all this money and we get other taxing opportunities and we forget to come back and take care of you. We can't do that. We can't forget to come back and have this conversation. David? Have y'all noticed how he keeps going over there and looking at the cards and then hands them to me? I like that, David.
I'll make sure she gets the hard ones. Okay.
Do a process check. Tell them what time it is.
All right, 7:32 for anybody that wants to know. This one says, what services are you against cutting? Community ministries, the juvenile center, administration and cut salaries. So I think we talked about all of those except for the Youth Detention Center. For you all that don't know, Vincent James is the grand poobah of the Youth Detention Center. And there are some council members that are discussing turning that back over to the state. To me, I'm with you. I'm just providing information. So there are some council members that are considering turning that back over to the state because they see that as a way of having an opportunity of reducing tax increases by doing so. And they see that as an opportunity to gain $8 million. I don't actually see it the same way. I see it as, I had a meeting with the state about that. I said, what would happen, Councilwoman Dorsey and I met together, McDonald's, 2nd and Broadway one morning. And we met with the Secretary of the Justice for the state. And we said, what would happen if that happened? I said, would you all come in and take over and run it? And they said, no. They said, we would actually ship your kids to other parts of the state. And what they said to me specifically was they could end up going to places like Boyd County, which is in far eastern Kentucky, and a 3.5-hour drive from here. And that our kids, so basically 90% of our kids are African American, is that right? In the center. And they would be going to a place where it's 100% Caucasian. And they would be going to a place where it's 100% Caucasian and the workers are 100% Caucasian and have had zero experience with African American boys and girls. And they make $11 an hour. So I'm telling you, the outcome of that is not going to be good. There's nothing good that's going to come from that. So I am one of the people that's very resistant towards that because I'm very concerned about how that'll turn out. There's a price you pay beyond just dollars and cents on what you do. I'll give you a real quick example. In 2008, we had the Great Recession, and the city decided to eliminate the Department of Neighborhoods and the Department of Juvenile Services. Today, in 2018, the people that we see being arrested for homicides and shootings are those kids that we kicked out of programs in 2008. All right? We saved money, but how many people died because of that decision? All right? What percentage of African Americans pay into the pension program, and are they being paid equally as their counterparts, as their Caucasian counterparts? Yes, everybody gets, your pension is based upon your years of service in the pension system and how much you get no matter whether you're black or white. And I'll,
Go ahead, keep going.
We need to work on better mental health in Jefferson County. Councilwoman Sexton Smith just talked about that. We do. That's why we funded the living room. Oh, there's Councilwoman Purvis. How you doing? And so that's why we funded the living room in order to deal with the mental health issues. You know, what we had been doing, I guess is the best way to say it, is criminalizing mental health. The police would get a call on somebody doing something. I'll hypothetically say it was Crazy Joe. He's out in the intersection again directing traffic and he's naked, right? And people call. And so the police would come and they had nothing else they could do with him except for take him and put him in the police car, and down to the jail he would go. And Joe is a very expensive trip to the jail because we have to get Joe back on his medication. And that takes a while. And so we get him straightened out, and Joe's just like you and I after that. Except then he gets out of jail, and he doesn't have any money because there's an attack on Medicaid. And so, but I didn't mention the governor. But anyways, and so he gets out of jail, and his medicine wears off. He doesn't have a way to get it refilled. And what happens again? You get the call again. And then back to the jail. And we spend a tremendous amount of money taking care of Joes of the world. And so the living room allows us to take care of Joe in a much more humane and better way, because it should not be a crime to have mental health issues in our community. Okay?
Right. All right, here we go. We're going to have to move quickly if we're going to try to help Pastor Thornton stay true to this schedule because it's 7:37. So let's try to do some lightning round responses if we can together. What would a complement of proposed cuts look like percentage-wise, monetarily? How would that affect the budget over 3 to 5 years? So what we're doing at the Metro Council right now, Daniel's helped us with formulas for every $1 million that we have in cuts. We know then the insurance premium tax would have to be X. So Daniel, I'm going to need you, if you want to do a couple examples for them? Okay, so because what it's looking like right now is the proposal on the table was to have a 12.5% increase on the insurance premium tax this year and next year, and then it would go to a 13.5% increase, and then it would, in the last year, would go to a 15% increase. There's a lot of folks that are saying, don't want to go above 10% increase, okay? So if that's your number, never goes above 10%, then Daniel will help us understand how much we have to cut then. Some people say can't go above 7% increase. Then what would that look like? So help us understand, because we are going to have to cut some things if we don't do all revenue.
So I would just preface the comment. There is a dollar amount that's raised for each percentage, but I think when we talk about the percentage, we're not talking about the services that we've been talking about youth detention, about police, about parks and libraries. So I would continue to think of this as service maintenance more than a abstract number, and I would focus on what services you want to maintain and which ones you feel like you can do without. So having said that, each percentage of non-auto, which is what's before the council right now, raises about $6.6 million of revenue, and we have a $35 million hole this year that grows by $10 million each year until FY23, where it becomes a $65 million hole. So that gives you some idea of the size, and you could come at it either way. You could come at it from what am I willing to increase revenue, or you could come at it from what are we willing to reduce, and that's what the council's been working on very diligently the last month or so.
All right, I retired from JCPS in 2001, and I'm wondering if this pension problem will affect my check. That's up to Governor Matt Bevin. Right?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, when taxes are increased, does the Metro Council have the authority to limit MSD and water increase? We have the authority to limit the MSD increase, which is one thing President James and I have been working on for a couple of years. You may know that we've been talking about this $397 billion infrastructure challenge for the next 20 years with MSD. We both have proposed an increase, but we've held that over here and put it on hold because we've been hit with this other tsunami, literally. And the water increase, the council does not control the water increase. And then what is?
And the mayor want to about a fat is amount of fat in the police department.
I think it says the mayor is talking about fat is in the police. No, it says a major fat in the police department. Cut the police and ordered in crime prevention instead of crime enforcement. Okay, this can be more effective cost. Okay, I think what that's about is, can we start investing in crime prevention versus crime enforcement? Hallelujah. You know, if we should do that. And Major McClinton and the other men and women in LMPD are doing a very good job of their community-oriented policing. And one department at Louisville Metro, Office of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods, received $2 million from Metro Council this last year, and they are running major programs throughout many areas of our community, and they are helping to reduce this crime that I talked about earlier. So I do know that everybody's looking at that. The police department has the largest portion of our overall budget, and Police Chief Conrad presented to Metro Council a few weeks ago, and he showed us what $7.9 million in cuts from LMPD would look like. It's devastating. If he were to have to cut that much out of just their department, the current and the next 2 recruit classes would be put on hold. We can't do that, you all, because we have men and women retiring. We have to train them up and replace them. I do know, though, that Major McClinton is looking for efficiencies and ways to reduce in preparation for this. And then President James has a couple more questions, and then I have one last thing I'll do, and away we go.
Is there a problem that I might ask when I don't have a card? Just a simple question. I'm sure it has to do with the budget. And I'll use the mic. It's okay. So everybody can hear me. Why is it that down at the waterfront, if someone commits a crime, there are cameras that you can see? But in the West End, where there's a high volume of crime, so many crimes go unsolved, and I'm assuming that there are no cameras that can pick up the people who are committing crimes. That would be a part of the budget, to put cameras in the West End. My question is, why aren't there cameras if they are not in the West End?
All right, I'm glad you brought that up. We all remember when we had the incident on the Big Four Bridge a number of years ago, and yes, cameras went up immediately, and it was $250,000 in cameras. I was not in Metro Council at the time, and I was a citizen sitting where you're sitting, and I thought the same thing. Here's what I've learned. There are cameras. There is a network of cameras that are linked through technology in our community that assist LMPD in doing the work that they do. We have a real-time crime center that is set up with 34 monitors, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with cameras rotating and working to let the operators at the real-time crime center see exactly what's happening and communicate that to the beat officers. In addition to that technology, we have something called ShotSpotter. It's another controversial piece of technology that was a $250,000 investment a few years ago, and it operates like a microphone picking up sound, and when shots pop off, cameras can then rotate and pick up activity, and I think the ShotSpotter is one reason that our shots have gone down 41%, as I mentioned earlier. So to answer your question, I'm sensitive too about cameras being on the bridge and not other places. They are other places.
Thank you. And you'd be actually surprised how many crimes we catch on those cameras. The police don't brag about it because they don't want everybody to know where the cameras are, right? Okay. Because then they're going to go somewhere else to commit their crimes. As long as they stand in front of the camera and commit the crime, it's good for us. All right. One of the things I wanted to make sure we talked about is the community ministries. The community ministries provide a vital service for our communities, whether you're talking about the West Louisville Community Ministries or South Louisville Community Ministries. Those community ministries feed people, they provide medication for people, they keep people in their homes, they do all those things that when we are at our very wit's end and someone comes to us for help and they say, what can I do? I've got a neighbor that's having this problem. That's when we go, let me introduce you to the community ministries. And they're the ones that help those people. And so I want you to understand that if we don't find the revenue, community ministries are not in a good situation. And so I know that there's been a lot of talk in the community about this or that and how much is this increase going to cost me. But what I would tell you is that how much will it cost you if we don't have the increase? Because the pain that our community will be felt, we'll all feel it. We'll feel it in so many different ways that I can't explain it. We'll feel it when there's people on the other side of the fence that, when I say other side of the fence, I'm a Democrat, Councilwoman Sexton Smith's a Democrat, Councilwoman Vanna is a Democrat, Councilwoman Purvis is a Democrat. And on the council, the majority of the Republicans on the council are against the Office of Healthy and Safe Neighborhoods. They think it's a waste of money. They think it's a waste of time. And they have said so. They just did a thing on WDRB last night. And so what I would tell you is that as we talk about the numbers of shootings and the number of murders that have gone down, they are not going down simply by the police department by themselves. The police need people on the street to help with that situation. Now, is it unconventional? Is it something that we're all used to, the way we do it? Yeah, it's different. It's out of the box thinking. But it's worked in other cities. And if it can work in other cities, then we should be trying it in this city. And so I just want you all to understand that, because part of what happens is we have a group of people and they're called interrupters. They're no angels. They've been in trouble before, okay? And by the grace of God, I'm not one of them, all right? And so they have been in trouble before, but they can talk to the people that are causing trouble in our community because they can relate. They have lived that life, they understand that life, and they can talk to people about retaliation. They show up at the funeral home to make sure that there's not a drive-by at the funeral home. They do all those things. They interrupt violence before it occurs. They can get the gun away from the person before they decide to use it. Many times a parent will call and say, my son's got a gun and I don't know what to do. The interrupters will show up, talk to him. That kid will turn that gun over to them, and a shooting has been prevented. So I want you to understand the work of the interrupters is not everything that you hear about on TV that's been getting the airplay on talk radio, okay? How do we build a community in law enforcement will be with integrity? I'm worried for my family. Okay, that's a hard question. Yes, sir.
The reason why I brought that question up because I spoke we have a flash bomb.
Can you come to the microphone, please?
I live right here in the Russell area. And the first thing I want to say, Pastor, you have a great church. You have a great school over here, and it brings me a lot of joy, just to see the kids out there and everything that's going on. That's what we need in our community. This is a role model for what we need to do to make Russell a better community. Okay. Anyway, my next door neighbor was his house was flash bombed. They were looking for somebody else. They had a warrant that was illegal. It wasn't the signature of the judge that was on it. It was somebody else's signature. It wasn't his. Okay. But they came in, flash bombed the house, scared the heck out of the kids. They wasn't wanting to come back in the house for a long time. The cat stayed downstairs because the cat was right by the flash bomb. So the cat would come out of the basement, and they arrested they had him locked up and everything like that. And then they tried to say that he was dealing drugs. Wasn't nothing found, okay? So we need to stop this. There's another incident. I was at a class over at Quinn Chapel, okay? And they came outside for a smoke break or whatever. But one guy was arrested, okay, because he was out on the street. He was talking to somebody in a car, okay? But the arresting officer was saying that he was doing something that looked to him like it was illegal, okay? So he went up and interrupted, and then when I went out and spoke to him, I'm a minister. When I went out and spoke to him, he blamed it on one of the 3 houses over there. Somebody over there called the police because some seemed like strange activity or whatever. Our police officers need to work with integrity, okay? Just like we work with integrity when we pay our taxes and they get their salaries paid, okay? They need to talk to us just like we talk to them. We are equal, and God made us equal, It's not because you got a badge on. And the question I always ask, are you an officer of the law, or are you a law officer? That means that you create your law as you go, okay? Is that the type of police officers that we have in this community, or in the city, or in our state, around the country? I'm a disabled veteran. I fought in 3 wars, okay? I fought for my people, all of us, whatever race you are, whatever color you are, okay? I put my life on the line to make sure you were safe. And I think we should have the same integrity in our law enforcement because we have rules of engagement. If they were shooting at us with a slingshot, we shot back at them with a slingshot, okay? We didn't put no M1 tank on them because they threw a rock at us, So we got to, some kind of way, change things. Now, my thing, too, I'm worried about this summer because we don't have anything for these kids to do in this community, nothing. You can ride around, see the kids standing on the street, groups, okay? And it's nothing but trouble. you know. So we need to do something about that as far as getting some kind of community, something going on. Have a dance party. These kids love to dance, okay? But that's all I want to say.
Telling us to dance to
Dance,
the clock
dance
has
after
been
the.
addiction.
All right, thank you, Pastor.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Thank you, Ms. Dorsey.
I just want to say to this gentleman and anyone else that's in here, if you have police complaints, I'll stay behind and you can talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I agree with you. I believe I spent 30 years as a police officer. And so I believe that policing with integrity is very important. And I would tell you that 99.9% of our police do that. But there's a small percentage that don't. And for them, I don't think they should be police officers. I think they should be in jail. However, I also, and it's no secret, I'm not a big fan of the police chief. And so I would tell you that when you put so much pressure on police officers to do high-profile, high-activity policing in a certain part of the city so that people that make a mistake while they're driving get stopped, that they wouldn't be stopped for in another part of the city, I think there's a problem with that. And so I'm hoping that we can get that rectified much sooner than later. But I agree with you, and I understand what you're saying, and I'll talk to you about this when this is over. Okay. How do we build, what will happen to people currently getting pensions with the shortfall? Again, Councilwoman Sexton Smith has said, it's up to the governor. He's going to play his games and he's going to do his thing. And that's why the kids weren't in school today. That's why the kids won't be in school tomorrow, because they're there protesting about what the governor's doing to the pension system. What happened to the program trained officers to look at mental health of people? There's still a program for mental health with the officers, critical incident teams. All the officers are trained in that, and they do that very well. Are they perfect? No. Am I perfect? No. I'm not. But they do a good job, and they try to get better every time, and they do training for that to do better. Thank you.
Okay. All right, now here we go. The last one, we got a green card. They said, what services are you against cutting? This person said, no cuts to the neighborhood places, no cuts to community ministries, no cuts to community services, EMS, or any housing programs, no cuts to programs that help our homeless. And it says, funds to those that provide food, such as Dare to Care, don't cut them. Then they said, please consider cutting combined departments, such as Jefferson County and the city when we merged, and reduce the salaries of some directors and assistant directors and administrators and coordinators and supervisors. They are looking at a possible, someone suggested a 10% cut across the board of anybody making above a certain level. Speaking of merger, I have one correction to make to a factoid I said earlier that may not have been clear. I said we went from 6,100 employees to 55 in recent years. Well, at my age, recent years is 2003 up to now with merger. So the 600 job difference has been since merger. With that, we're going to ask for the Honorable Vincent James to join us at the podium for what you've all been waiting for, a benediction, along with Pastor George Thornton. There are several handouts that are going to be back toward the back. I'm going to encourage you to please pick them up. Please pick them up. Thank you so, and thank you all so much. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you, sir.
Certainly want to thank Councilwoman Smith for this meeting tonight, and also for all of the city officials, Chief Financial Officer Daniel Cumming, McLennan, thank you for being here tonight. Of course, President James, thank you for your presence again. And we thank all of you. There's a biblical injunction that says, people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. When you don't have knowledge and when you're not informed, you can't make good decisions. And so what we tried to do tonight here is to begin to create a process where you can be able to share and talk with your city officials about the concerns in your community, in our community, and then also how we can collectively work together to improve the place where we live. Amen? And so I've asked my colleague to come up and clergy to offer the closing prayer, because, you know, we got to work together. And so I've asked him to come and give us our closing prayer. Shall we stand? There's cookies and drinks in the back. Please make sure you take them. I can't eat them. You see, look at me. I can't eat them. So make sure.
Me and you both.
Yeah. Again, we thank you all for coming tonight, and we look forward to having many more meetings like this. Anytime, I've told Councilwoman, we need to have meetings quarterly where we can get together with community, not just with matters of pressing issue, but keep this conversation going. And I think it's a good start tonight. And thank you for coming.
Thank you, Pastor Thornton, and thank you all again for coming. And also want to recognize my president of the Interdenominational Ministerial Coalition, Minister David Snarden, Pastor David Snarden. And we are so thankful to be here and to close this time out on tonight with prayer, because the Bible says that the power of prayer, or the people of God pray, prayer availeth much. And so we believe in the power of prayer. And thank God that he has a praying pastor in government that is working and praying, because it's not enough just to pray. We have to get out and put our feet to the ground to work. I want you to bow your head and close your eyes as we go to the Lord in prayer. Our God, our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this moment and this time that you've given us to come and to hear all of this information as community leaders and political elected officials and community-minded people who have a desire to see their community whole. And we know, God, that nobody's upset but the enemy. And the Bible says when the enemy comes in like a flood, God will raise a standard against him. I think the standard against the enemy is knowledge. And the information that was shared here tonight is a standard that the people can now make decisions for themselves, that they don't have to rely on media or hearsay, but they know directly, God, exactly what they must do. And you said in your word that if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask, and you would give it to him generously. I pray, God, that you would give all of the leaders in Metro Council and Metro government the wisdom to make the right decisions, that, God, you would order our steps according to your word, that we would get out of our own silos and look at what the people need and what the people are demanding. We thank you as we stand on tiptoes of anticipation, believing and expecting, God, for you to show up and show out and do something significant in our lives, because we know what you can do, God, based on what you already done. And if somebody has forgotten tonight, I would inquire you to pull out your faith file and remember what God has already done, that he can do it again. Now unto him who's able to keep you from falling, to present you faultless before his presence with exceeding joy. To the only wise God be glory, majesty, dominion, and power, henceforth and forevermore. Let all the people of God say together, amen. Be blessed, my brothers.